Hi everybody, Amy Osborne here, talking today about meal timing in relationship to workout timing. This is a question that I've gotten a lot over my career. What do I eat before I work out? What do I eat after I work out? And I think that this time of year, we even have more questions, right? Because a lot of us have the best of intentions, and maybe some of us are trying new things like protein supplements. God knows we're getting a lot of ads for that sort of thing being thrown at us right now, or intermittent fasting. So I wanted to just talk briefly about why meal timing is important with relationship to your exercise, no matter what type of exercise you're doing. So when we exercise, we're causing a little bit of damage to our muscle tissues. That's what we call catabolism, or a catabolic process. The muscle tissue gets broken down and then we rebuild it. Our body rebuilds it via anabolic processes, or anabolism, so building back up. And then ideally we come back stronger. So this is true if we're doing endurance work, if we're doing strength work, or even if you're doing something like high intensity interval training. No matter what, our body's going through that process. So in order for anabolism to occur, our body has to undergo what's called muscle protein synthesis. And in order for that to occur, we have to make sure that we have adequate energy substrate and adequate nutrients, primarily protein and carbohydrates. So fat is another of our is the other macronutrient, but that doesn't play a huge role in all of this. Fat is a great energy substrate, and I am totally on board with being fat adapted for cardio and endurance work, but that is a discussion for another time. If we're really looking at strength, and in particular muscle hypertrophy, so making our muscles bigger or stronger, we need to be looking at the timing of our carbohydrates and our protein. So, there kind of was historically this anabolic window that was this magic time frame, right, where in the 45 minutes to an hour after working out, you need to get your protein and your carbohydrates in. Otherwise, your workout was all for naught. And, a lot of the new research kind of disproves that theory. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we utilize carbohydrates, how we utilize proteins, and then what meal timing should actually look like. So carbohydrates are really our main energy substrate for exercise. They get broken down into glycogen, they get stored in our muscles, and our muscles actually then can utilize that stored glycogen to power us through a workout. That's primarily what carbs do. Carbohydrates also have an anabolic effect. So when we eat carbohydrates, especially post-workout, we get an insulin release, right? We get an insulin release no matter when we eat our carbohydrates. That's how our body will process that carbohydrate. And insulin is anabolic in nature, meaning it says, okay, body, it's time to store. So when we eat carbohydrates, the thought process is okay, now we're going to rebuild. So historically, people are always thinking, okay, I just had a hard workout. I've got to get some sugar or some simple carbohydrates in my diet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe a better way to do that. Protein, on the other hand, it can work as an energy substrate, but that's only in the absence of adequate carbohydrates. So protein, if we eat too much of it, or if we don't have enough carbohydrates, can be converted into glucose, so it can become an energy substrate. But inherently, protein really isn't like a macronutrient that's full of energy. What protein offers is amino acids, and those amino acids are taken up by our muscles, and they help to repair the muscle tissue post-workout. So, I've talked a little bit about in the past that muscles can store upwards of over 300 grams of carbohydrates. So we know that our body can store about 500 grams of carbohydrates in total, a third of which go to the liver, about 2/3 go to the muscle. And our bodies are naturally trying to spare that muscle glycogen because we're at a very primitive level, just trying to survive. You never know when you're going to have to run away from a threat. So our bodies at rest are not tapping into those glycogen stores, those muscle glycogen stores. So if you're getting ready to go to a workout and you've been eating pretty normally with some carbohydrates in your diet, yeah, you can walk right into a workout and typically have adequate energy to get through that workout, assuming that it's not really long endurance intense or super duper high intensity. So if your workouts are, an average hour-long workout, you should have, even if you're lifting heavy, I should say, or even if you're going really hard, you should have adequate glycogen to power you through those workouts if you've been eating normally, excuse me. So if we think about 300 grams of stored glycogen in our muscles, that's 1,200 calories worth of carbs. So a lot of us have that if we're eating adequate. Now, if you're somebody that eats low carb, you might be somebody that does need to consider eating a pre-workout carbohydrate, something that is lower in fat to kind of not delay the digestion or that gastric emptying so that you can actually process that more quickly and then be able to utilize it as a fuel source throughout your workout. Carbohydrate in the post-workout period might not be as important as we once thought. Like I said, we do know that it does have that kind of anabolic effect. It is going to lead to the insulin sensitivity. There's actually some evidence that shows that we have increased transportation of the GLUT4 protein, which basically means that, long story short, we're going to be more sensitive to insulin, which is what we really want, right? So taking that carbohydrate in post-workout can facilitate that. It'll have that anabolic effect. And then it'll also replenish your glycogen stores, right? So that if you burned up 300 grams of carbohydrates, I don't expect you to eat 300 grams of carbohydrates post-workout, but you can start to replenish some of the stores that you may have burned off. Protein is also, like I said before, the essential, or those amino acids are going to be pulled into your cells, help with protein synthesis, and to rebuild your muscles. But what I wanted to really touch on today in terms of post-workout is that it's not necessarily as important to get that meal in that hour window afterward. What's more important is that we are getting adequate protein throughout the day, right? So this is where I often see a lot of my clients have things fall apart. So I will see somebody that will say, well, I get done with my workout and I take my protein shake and that's 30 grams of protein. And then I go home and I eat blah, blah, blah. And it's, at the end of it, they're taking in 75 grams of protein, and our bodies can't actually absorb that much protein at once. So we can kind of absorb somewhere between 30 to 35, maybe even 40 grams of protein, but no more than that. Whatever is excess, those amino acids get excreted in our urine, and then some, again, might be converted to fat, some might be converted to glucose. So there's really no reason to just hammer big amounts of protein post-workout. What's more important is to space your protein out throughout the day and to make sure you're getting enough throughout the day. So I usually tell people, it's kind of accepted now that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is a good kind of rule of thumb in terms of determining how much protein you need throughout the day. And a lot of us don't get that, especially athletes. And that's where we can actually see things fall apart. It's not that they're getting they're not getting protein in that little window. It's that they're not getting enough throughout the day. So that's a lot of information, I know. But I guess my 3 takeaway points from that is, you may not need a pre-workout meal. If you've been eating normally and you're not doing something like intermittent fasting, which if you are, I would suggest breaking a fast if you're going to be doing anything really high intensity, so that anaerobic work, energy levels that you can't sustain, or intensity levels you can't sustain, or really heavy lifting. I certainly suggest getting some carbohydrate in pre-workout if you are somebody that has been fasting. But if you're eating normally, you probably have enough carbohydrate to get you through that workout. In terms of post-workout, I'd rather see people make time to get a really good high quality meal in with a complex carbohydrate, or if you do want to get something, or eat something that's more of a simple carbohydrate, now would be the time to do it in the post-workout window, during which time you have a higher insulin sensitivity. And then some protein, so 25, 35, 40 grams of protein. And that does not need to happen in that little short window right afterward. If you're not somebody that's going to be able to get a good quality meal in, a protein shake, that's when we can utilize something like that. And then the final point would be to get enough protein throughout the day. So if you're looking to get more strength this year, those are my 3 takeaways in terms of timing your food with your workouts. I hope that this helps and sheds some light on this topic. Obviously, it's much more complex than that, but that'll give you kind of some basic guidelines if you're just kind of starting to pay more attention to this in the new year. Or maybe you've paid attention to this and you weren't aware of some of those things. Hopefully it was helpful to you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me with any questions that you might have about this. And thank you so much for watching.